here. Good morning. We are in Genesis chapter 31 all the way through 33. And let's go ahead and let's get started. I want to say a word of prayer for us. Lord God, I just thank you so much for today and for calling us again to be yours. And Lord, you know, there are times that we just go, Lord, I do not deserve you. And you know what? That's every day. But Lord, you chose, because of your great name, to call us and set us aside for your use. And I just pray that you would bless each one that's hearing, watching, taking a few minutes to do this. Lord, I just pray your blessing over them in Jesus' precious name. Amen. Okay, so here we are in Genesis chapter 31, and we're not good. There's so much to read. I'm going to kind of hop around a little bit. Good morning, Susan. How are you? Wow, you're here. Jacob heard that Laban's sons were saying, Jacob has taken everything our father owned and has gained all this wealth from what belonged to our father. And Jacob noticed that Laban's attitude toward him was not what it had been. Then the Lord said to Jacob, go back to the land of your fathers and to your relatives, and I will be with you. So Jacob sent word to Rachel and Leah to come out to the fields where his flocks were. And he said to them, I see that your father's attitude toward me is not what it was before, but God of my father has been with me. You know that I've worked for your father with all of my strength, yet your father has cheated me by changing my wages 10 times. However, God has not allowed him to harm me. If he said the speckled ones will be your wages, then all the flocks had speckled young. And if he said the streaked ones will be your wages, then all of the flocks had streaked young. So God has taken away your father's livestock and has given it to me. And it goes on down. So he goes ahead and says, and I have said, look up and see that all the male goats are with the streaked and speckled. And the Lord gave this word to me. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar and where you made a vow to me. Now leave this land at once and go back to your native land. Then Rachel and Leah replied, do we still have any share in our father's inheritance or our father's estate? Does he regard us as foreigners? Not only has he sold us, but he's also used up what was paid for us. Surely all the wealth that God took away from my father belongs to us and our children, so do whatever God has told you. So then Jacob put his children and his wives on camels, and he drove all his livestock ahead of him, along with all the goods he had accumulated in Padan Aram, to go to his father Isaac in the land of Canaan. But when Laban had gone to shear his sheep, Rachel stole her father's household idols. Moreover, Jacob deceived Laban, the Aramean, by not telling him he was running away. So he fled with all he had, crossed the Euphrates River, and headed for the hill country of Gilead. Okay, that was a lot. There's so much going on here. The family dynamics are absolutely crushingly broken. It's nuts, because here you've had this family business, which would have been common. And herders, they had shared the sheep. He'd grown his own flocks, sent them to his sons to take care of. This was Jacob, and he had stayed with his father-in-law's flocks and been the head over them. So whether Laban didn't have sons that were reliable or Laban didn't have sons that were older than Jacob, Jacob had been his head shepherd for many, many, many years. And then he began to have his own flocks, and Jacob's children, his sons, took care of them off somewhere else. So you have this family business that's going on, and all of this changing of the wages over the years. So there's this animosity that has grown between the family group. The girls are saying that they feel like that they've been rejected by their father. Their inheritance has been taken. Maybe it was because it was the younger boys that had been born to their dad. We don't know the whole story there, but we just know that there was an internal struggle with the business, with the inheritance, with rejection. And I will tell you, those are so devastating when it comes to families, that we can see our families absolutely shredded because of money. May the Lord spare us such grievances, but this is what this family is going through. So what was the deal with her stealing the household gods? I just kind of want to get into that just for a minute. The idea of the household gods was that the household gods belonged to the person who inherited the land, inherited all of the flocks and the herds. It would have been the oldest son that was liable for that was available to have that inheritance. if that son, for some reason, was disinherited, those gods did not go to him. They always went with the house. They went with the property. It was not. It was stronger than a symbol. It was, this belongs, because these are the gods that we serve here on this land. This is the God that we serve. So therefore, this land right here, this is who will be serving this God. The gods came very closely knit with the property and with the inheritance. So when Rachel stole those, she knew that her father was going to notice them missing. She had to have known that because they were a prominent part of the entire family structure. The gods were important to them to the extent that it was part of the rightful inheritance. So maybe that's a little bit more of an indication that Jacob was considered the oldest son, because maybe Laban didn't have any sons when he first got there. So the girls maybe thought that all of this would belong to them, and now it's been taken away. And they feel like they're having to be treated as foreigners. Just go ahead and go on to your husband's family because now you're not needed because you have baby brothers. I don't know. You see, we have all of this dynamic going on. Now, what did the Lord tell Jacob? He said, go back to your country, go back to your father. But he didn't say sneak away. The girls were like, let's do what the Lord tells you to do. Let's go ahead and let's get out of here. Well, that is what the Lord said. He said, go back to your native land. But he didn't say you had to sneak away. So it's like Jacob is stirring up trouble that wasn't maybe there. But see, we don't know. And I think it's very interesting that when the Bible tells us about this, that it doesn't condemn any of the activity. It's just relating the story. So how does that connect to us? How do we deal with family conflict? How do we deal with problems of inheritance, with family businesses, with rejection, with all the things that go anytime that we have a close familial relationship with someone that we feel like is hurting us? You know, the only cure that I know, and see, Jacob didn't have this. He had it flowing through him, but he didn't have it yet, and that is the grace and the love of Jesus, because I know that without him, we would all be torn down to the absolute core of who we are, because our families are eventually going to hurt us in some way or another. Our children, our parents, our siblings, there's going to be family conflict, and I'm so grateful that the Lord went on ahead and let his word be true to the actual events in a way that it doesn't make our biblical heroes out to be perfect people. Aren't you so grateful for that? I am so grateful that Jacob had these troubles so that I can know that the Lord will still use my life. He will still be in control of who I am and what my real destiny is and who I'm going to be in his historical information about me. Yes, there's going to be messes, but you know what? The Lord is my Redeemer, and that doesn't change at all. And I just praise the Lord for that. Now then, let's go ahead and let's go on over. So Laban pursued Jacob, and on the third day he caught up with him, and he said, what have you done? But the Lord had appeared to Laban and said, don't you say a good word or a bad word to Jacob. You just go ahead and what was that? And you go ahead and you make sure that what you do is just be careful around him. So why did you run off secretly? This is verse 27. Why did you run off secretly and deceive me? Why didn't you tell me so I could send you away with joy, singing to the music of timbrels and harps? Now, we don't know if that's what Laban would have done. We don't know if Laban would have expected more from Jacob. We don't know if there would have been a quarrel. We don't know what Laban's real heart would have been. But at this point, Laban is kind of out of control of the situation, and so he's going to have to let them go. And now the Lord has appeared to him. Jacob's God has appeared to him and said, don't harm him. So he's like, we could have had a party and done all these great things to send you off. I don't ever get to see these grandchildren again. I don't ever get to see my daughters again. What a grieving part that must have been for Laban, but that was the way it would have been during these days. And so I have the power to harm you. See, because he didn't just come alone, he came with all the relatives. So here comes Laban, he gathers up all the relatives. Okay, why would it have been such a big deal? Here, you've got these daughters and grandchildren, yes, but you know what it really was? Now you have gone off because you've longed to return to your father's house, but why did you steal my gods? So Laban is not just chasing after the children, the grandchildren, his daughters. And he's not just chasing off after Jacob, who was his main laborer. It's this whole thing about those gods. Again, we have, God is beginning to reveal himself as the one true God. And these are people groups that had multiple gods, and the Lord is beginning to show them there is one God, and I will only be served. But at this point, this is still very tied up with the estate, with the inheritance, with everything that Laban had. This was something that was passed down to him from his father and from his father's father's father. And so this was a really, really big deal. So I don't know if maybe Rachel, she took those knowing that her father would pursue them. Maybe she wanted to say goodbye. Or maybe it was some sort of vindictive spirit. Again, we don't have all of the details of that. We just know that that was one of the primary reasons that he actually chased after them. And so Rachel had stolen the gods, and then they didn't find them because she deceived her dad and told him that she was on her period, so he would not mess with her while she was on the camel. And then this is what Jacob responds to him. And he says, I've been with you for 20 years now. I haven't done anything bad to your animals. I've taken all the losses. All of these things have happened. And then in verse 42, if the God of my father, the God of Abraham and the fear of Isaac had not been with me, you would surely have sent me away empty-handed. And maybe that's true. Maybe that was the character of Laban. But God has seen my hardship and the toil of my hands, and last night rebuked you. Well, Laban answered Jacob, the women are my daughters, the children are my children, the flocks are my flocks. All you see is mine, yet what can I do today about these daughters of mine or about the children they have borne? Come now, let's make a covenant, you and I, and let it serve as a witness between us. So they took a stone and set it up as a pillar, and he said to his relatives, gather up some stones. They put it in a heap, and they said, let it be a witness between us that we're not going to attack each other. So it's interesting because he says, if the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac, don't you just love that? In other translations, it'll say the fearsome God of Isaac. Okay, so I want to fast forward over here. Here, Laban goes ahead and he blesses him, and he goes ahead and says right here in middle of 50, well, let's go ahead in 53, may the God of Abraham and the God of Nahor, the God of their father, judge between us. So Jacob took an oath in the name of the fear of his father Isaac. So that, again, capitalized, God of fear, the fearsome God of Isaac. Incredible, because let's go ahead and let's fast forward to chapter 32 at verse 7. In great fear and distress, Jacob divided the people who were with him into two groups in flocks and herds and camels as well. He thought, if Isaac comes and attacks one group that is left may escape. Okay, well, what? So here he is. He's standing on this premise, on this great stone, this great rock of, I have this fearsome God of Isaac. And then in the next situation that he faces, he's almost to Esau. He is so terrified that he splits his group into two different groups. So if one of them is slaughtered by Esau, then the other one will be spared. Not really a bad idea, but he understands that his father has this fearsome God. But that fearsome God, that great protector, has not born into him to the depths that he would not be afraid, that he would go ahead and take up again the old ways between he and his brother Esau. Again, the family dynamics are just absolutely painfully real here, because the old ways, the going back home, all of those feelings of childhood or adolescence are rushing back on him. The way he deceived his brother, the guilt that he had about that, all that's going on here, this is creating him great fear and distress. Again, I'm glad that the Lord allowed these things to be revealed about Jacob. Then Jacob prayed, O God of my father Abraham, God of my father Isaac, Lord, you who said to me, go back to your country and your relatives, and I will make you prosper. I am unworthy of all the kindness and faithfulness you have shown your servant. I had only my staff when I crossed the Jordan, but now I have become two camps. Save me, I pray, from the hand of my brother Esau, for I am afraid that he will come and attack me, and also the mothers and their children. But you have said, I will surely make you prosper, and will make your descendants like the sand of the sea, which cannot be counted. So here we have him. He's repeating back to God the covenant he had been given. It's this fearful prayer. And he realizes that God is a fearsome God, but then he becomes afraid just the next chapter over, just a few days later, maybe a few weeks, depending on how long it took them to get there with all that they owned. Oh, isn't that just like us? I feel like it's like me. There are times that I know who God is. I know he's given me promises. I know that all that he said is true, but then I'll go to him in great distress. And Jacob shows us that it's okay to do that, to say, you know what, I am afraid and I am distressed because you gave me all these promises, but right now, this second, see, we know the end of the story. Jacob didn't. At that point in time, he didn't know what the end of the story was going to be, if he was going to be half slaughtered or whole slaughtered. He didn't know. So in our lives, when we are full of anxiety, maybe rightfully so, maybe there's something we have to face that we haven't wanted to face, and the Lord has a way of bringing us back to places that are difficult and painful so that we can get some resolution. But those times can be the scariest times of all. We can cry out knowing that we are in the hands of a fearsome God in a good way, that he is there as our protector. If God is not strong enough to rescue me, then what kind of a God is he? He is there as my redeemer, and he's there as my fearsome, loving, protecting, promising, covenant God. That's who he is to Jacob. That's who he is to me today. So going on into we're still in chapter 32, in about verse 22. That night, Jacob got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 sons, and crossed the ford of Jabbok. After he had sent them across the stream, he sent over all of his possessions. So Jacob was left alone. And a man wrestled with him till daybreak. When he saw that he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip so that his hip was wrenched as he wrestled with the man. Then the man said, "Let me go, for it's daybreak." But Jacob replied, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." And the man asked, "What is your name?" "Jacob," he answered. Then the man said, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome." Jacob said, "Please tell me your name." But he replied, "Why do you ask my name?" Then he blessed him there. So Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, "It is because I saw God face to face, and yet my life was spared." So here we have this prayer that he's offered up to the Lord, and then he's finally left alone. I know that it's times when I'm really alone with the Lord, and I'm alone to the point of facing the fears that I've just cried out to him about. Or I'm completely alone whenever I have realized that there's nothing I can do. There's nothing more. He's done everything. He's exhausted every resource. He has just divided his family into 2 parts. He's done everything he can do to provide for their protection. And then he pulls away and he's alone. And the Lord comes to him and he wrestles. And I know that there are times when I'm alone that I just wrestle with the Lord. But I have to be alone to do that. When the flurry of everything crazy is going on, he had 11 little kids, or 11 sons that were maybe teenagers, probably many of them maybe even grown by this point. So he has them of all age ranges. And so he's got this bustling family, all the craziness and the flocks and this group and that group, and all of these things are whirling around him. And I can totally relate to him. But when he was alone, the Lord came and wrestled with him. And what was he wrestling out of Jacob? What was this wrestling about? Well, the key is whenever he changed his name from Jacob, this deceiver, to Israel. And that is the promise that God says that I am your Redeemer. I have called you out. I am here with you. You don't have to be the deceiver anymore because I'm changing you. I'm redeeming you. This is what I'm doing, and I'm giving you a different name. And I cry out to the Lord all the time, "Lord, give me a new name. Give me a new name, the name that's between you and me, that puts your stamp on my life." And of course now, as as we all know, Israel is who Jacob was, and Israel becomes the great nation that the Lord promised to him. But it would have never been if he had not been alone. So in our times when we are in distress and we may be full of fear and we're at the end of our resources, that's when the Lord will come and change everything. He will come and change our name to be everything he's called us to be from the beginning. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to end up here at the end of 33. Now he goes ahead and he meets Esau. And when he gets to Esau, Esau ran to meet Jacob and embraced him. He threw his arms around his neck. This is verse 4 of chapter 33 of Genesis. And they wept. Then Esau looked up and saw the women and children. "Who are these with you?" he asked. Jacob answered, "They are the children God has graciously given your servant." Then the female servants and their children approached and bowed down. Next Leah and her children came and bowed down. Last of all came Joseph and Rachel, and they too bowed down. Esau asked, "What's the meaning of all the flocks and herds I met?" "To find favor in your eyes, my lord," he said. But Esau said, "Oh, I already have plenty, my brother. Keep what you have for yourself." Again, going back to that whole thing that we talked about last week, everything that happened in Esau's life was not the treacherous things that were spoken of him. This whole thing of fighting and struggling against your brother, that didn't happen to Esau. It happened later on. It was a prophecy about Esau yet to come, the Edomites, and eventually Herod over Jesus. And so that all, if you missed that, you're going to have to go back. So Esau had had a great life. He ended up having the inheritance that his father had promised that he would have as the oldest, although Jacob tried to steal it. Jacob didn't steal anything. Jacob did not steal the blessing, did not receive the stolen blessing, the goods of it. When Jacob left, his father promised him the covenant blessing, which was not a stolen blessing. It was a blessing that his father knew belonged to Jacob. But Esau, his life ended up being just fine. He had all these kids. He had a great wealth. He didn't need anything that Jacob had given to him, but Jacob insisted. He said, "Okay, fine. Then you just go ahead and give me your stuff. If that makes you feel better, I don't care. I don't really need it, but whatever." So then if Esau says, "Well, we'll just come with you," but see this whole thing of Jacob still not trusting the situation. But Jacob said, "My Lord knows that the children are tender and that I must care for the ewes and the cows that are nursing their young. If they are driven hard even just one day, all the animals will die. So let my Lord go ahead of his servant while I move along slowly at the pace of the flocks and herds before me and the pace of the children until I come to my Lord at Seir," which is where Esau said, "Come on, let's go back home. My home's in Seir. Let's go." Esau said, "Then let me leave some of the men with you." Now, I can understand Jacob going, "No, it's okay. We're safe so far. Y'all just go ahead and we'll catch up to you." And again, these family dynamics, they're driving me a little bit crazy, but, I love the realities of it. But then let me leave some men. "Oh, but why do that?" Jacob asked. "Just let me find favor in the eyes of my Lord." So that day Esau started on his way back to Seir. But Jacob, however, went to Succoth, where he built a place for himself and made shelters for his livestock. That is why the place is called Succoth, which means shelters. After Jacob came from Paddan Aram, he arrived safely at the city of Shechem in Canaan and camped within sight of the city. For 100 pieces of silver he bought from the sons of Hamor, the father of Shechem, the plot of ground where he pitched his tent. And there he set up an altar and called it El Ahoy Israel, which means, "Mighty is the God of Israel." Through all of everything that Jacob has gone through the deceptions, through the running, through the hiding, even now he deceived his brother, the Lord God has stayed mighty. What a testimony. The inconsistencies of our hero here, the ups and downs and the craziness and the lies and the deceiving and who he is inside of him. He's just wrestling with all of that, his identity in God. And yet the Lord is never changing. And so as you and I face our world and all the turbulent times that we have, and even the turbulent times in our own hearts, the Lord is mighty. He is mighty to save, and his throne is not shaken. His purpose in my life is not ripped out of his hands. He loves me. He loves you. He wants to change our name and our identity to be identified in him completely and to leave our old identities behind. We're going to see if Jacob eventually learns that, or if maybe it's his descendants that have to get it. But right now, the Lord Jesus has given us the power and authority to do it through his blood because he loves us so much. You guys have a great day.